and pleased to welcome you all to this remote meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve my right. That's Councillor Mackay.
There was a bit of a delay there, Councillor Mackay. I was just giving you a few seconds. Thank you very much. I ask, though, that people at the meeting will now know that this is happening. My role as chairman will continue. However, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic Services Officer, Mrs. Banks. The officer will not steer the debate. They will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. Democratic Services Officer Miss Parfitt is also in attendance. Members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to all those viewing the meeting and must only be used by members to indicate their wish to speak. As I mentioned a little earlier on, if you could kindly put your surname in the instant messaging on this system we're on, it may be easier to track, please, when you wish to speak. And okay, now I go to the clerk to take the attendance register of members, please, who will confirm by answering present.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, members. So Councillor M. Burton, we have apologies for, and we have Councillor Springett with us as a substitute member.
Sorry, Councillor Springett's present.
Thank you. Councillor Joy?
Present.
Councillor Cadker? I think we're still waiting on, we'll come back. Councillor Mortimer?
Present.
Councillor Powell?
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Robertson, we also have apologies for, and instead we have Councillor Kimments as a sub.
Yeah, Councillor Kimments present.
Thank you. Councillor D. Rose?
Present.
Councillor M. Rose?
Present.
And Councillor Young?
Present.
Thank you.
Is that everyone, Lara?
Yeah, sorry, that concludes the attendance. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. The clerk will now read out the officers present and which items they will be presenting.
So we have the Policy and Information Manager, Hannah Gaston, for item 14, Housing and Health Manager, Nigel Bucklow, for item 15, Senior Policy and Engagement Officer, Orla Sweeney, for item 16, Parks and Open Spaces Manager, Andrew Williams, for item 17, Housing Delivery Manager, Andrew Connors, for item 18. We also have with us the Head of Housing Community Services, John Littlemore. We have Olivia Parfitt as Democratic Services Officer and myself, Lara Banks, as the clerk.
Lovely, thank you very much, Lara. Okay, so item 1 is apologies. We've had apologies received from Councillor Burton and Mrs. Robertson. Item 2, substitute members. We've got Councillor Springett, as we just heard, for Councillor Burton, and Councillor Kimmants for Councillor Mrs. Robertson. There's no other substitute members this evening. We don't have any urgent items on item 3 this evening. Notification of visiting members. I know that Councillor Atkinson and Councillor Harper are visiting members for items 12 and 17. Are there any other visiting members, please? No.
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Malcolm Mackay.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm, very much. Do you have an item you wish to speak on particularly?
I may wish to respond to the question being asked of the committee.
Okay, right, I understand. Fine, thank you very much. Lovely. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. I'm going to start the ball rolling this evening regarding the item 17, the local nature reserves item. I'm a trustee of Hale Park Nature Reserve, appointed by the council because I'm a ward member there. And I have the report this evening is only for noting, and there's no financial element in the report, so I do tend to carry on as normal and vote if required, if that's okay with everyone. Are there any other disclosures or from members or officers?
Yes, Chairman, I'm also a trustee, but of Fant Wildlife. I'm trustee and chairman, but I've been given dispensation in the past. That's perfectly okay. And as you say, there's no financial considerations here, so I'll just carry on speaking as I'd intended. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to say that I am actually on the committee of Fant Wildlife Park, so therefore.
Rose, isn't
Sorry,
it?
yeah, Councillor Margaret, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Margaret. Anyone else wish to declare anything? No, that's it. Welcome to the meeting, Dinesh. You are in, if you can hear us.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this all the
Okay.
technology, eventually I'm here.
All right, lovely. Okay, item 6, disclosures of lobbying. The clerk will now ask members if they've any disclosures of lobbying. They must answer either none or yes and specify the item or items when asked. Over to you, Lara.
Thank you. Councillor Joy?
None.
Councillor Cadker?
None.
Councillor Kimmants? I think you're on mute, Councillor Kimmants. I'll come back in a second. Councillor Mortimer?
None.
Councillor Powell?
None.
Councillor Pearl? Sorry, I'm reading from an old list. Councillor D. Rose?
None.
Councillor M. Rose?
Yes, lobbying on item 10, which is the question that will be put to us by Mrs. D. Bonnet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Springett?
None.
That's it, is it?
Sorry,
Okay.
Councillor Young, I didn't.
None. No, I didn't hear. I couldn't
Sorry.
hear you. None.
Sorry, yes, sorry, my audio's gone a bit as well. Can we get back to Councillor Kimmants? Are you able to?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, my cat decided that he wanted to play with a computer. No, I've had no lobbying.
Okay, thank you. That concludes lobbying, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, item 7, consider any items being should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. There is one part 2 item this evening, item 18, which is the Granada House item. I propose that this item is taken in closed session. If there is no dissent, I will assume this is agreed. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8, minutes of the meeting on the 12th of March. I plan to move that the minutes of the meeting, the 2nd of March, be agreed as a correct record. If there's no dissent, I will assume that's agreed.
Agreed.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Councillor Mackay.
Certainly. Hello. Yeah.
Part 2 meetings, will I, as a guest, be able to remain for the exempt Granada House?
It's okay with me because you've actually spoken on it before, Malcolm, haven't you? But I'm not sure whether I need an officer's opinion on that.
We haven't got a monitoring officer on the call, but usually, unless there's permission given by the monitoring officer, it is just members of the committee that will be voting.
Voting, yes.
Olivia,
I never
if you want
expected to vote. Sorry, I'm not on this committee.
Sorry. No, sorry, I wasn't clear then. It would only be committee members that are voting that would be able to attend the part 2. Olivia, can I get you to confirm that's correct, please?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank
Right.
you.
Okay, sorry about that, Malcolm. Right.
No, to be honest with you, quite frankly, nothing surprises me on this particular issue. So I'll move on.
Right. Okay, thank you. Sorry, we've the minutes, by the way, that was agreed, wasn't it? Is everybody okay with the minutes? Yep, no dissent.
Agreed.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are no petitions this evening on item 9. Questions and question and answer session for members of the public. There's one question this evening from a member of the public. Miss Bonnet, would you like to ask your question now, please, Dee?
Yes, hello everyone. I'd like to address the committee and ask, since the pilot scheme was implemented in August 2020, the recognition of John Chadwick's memory continues to gather momentum to a much wider audience. Therefore, I have vowed to continue moving Maidstone Borough Council and the Chi panel forward positively. I will no longer agree to any interviews that do not include the pet policy for emergency accommodation and the pilot scheme inspired by his tragic death. John Chadwick's memory no longer needs to stop at his suicide. The changes made here in Maidstone for pets and accommodation is firmly seen to have set the benchmark for local authorities to follow suit. Would Maidstone Borough Council and the Chi panel consider naming the changes made in memory of John Chadwick? I would like to see this as being Chadwick's Rule or John Chadwick's Rule or any such fitting tributes in his name. I feel this would further set a precedence for local authorities to follow, both here in the UK and abroad.
Okay, Dee, thank you very much for coming along again this evening. Here's our answer. We are pleased to hear that the progress is being made nationally on this topic, and thanks to no small part to your ongoing contribution to this issue. The pilot policy is due to be reviewed by this committee later on this year, as you're aware, and I will be asking officers to include within that report a recommendation along the lines that you've suggested this evening. This will enable members of the Chi committee to consider your proposal. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an amazing response. Thank you. Yeah, just one more question. Are Maidstone Borough Council informing those who are residing in emergency accommodation with their pets of their rights to be able to refuse the first offer of accommodation, which may have a no pet policy or which may not be suitable for the pets?
Right. Unfortunately, because your question isn't out of the original question, it's difficult for me to answer.
Oh, okay.
However,
Yeah.
if you recall, it is in the policy that we passed on this committee fairly recently. So normal procedures would be going forward, and I know there's a few other members of this committee will probably back me up on that. But that is my response at this moment in time, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much, everybody, for allowing me to come along at this time.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping us all in touch as well with the
I'll carry
national.
on. There's more to come, I can assure you. Okay.
Yes. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Chair, may I speak on this? Councillor Margaret Rose, may I speak on this?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would very much like to commend Dee on her dedication and resolve in working to implement this companion animal policy within the MBC tenancy policy. I'd also like to thank and commend those MPs who have put forward and supported the recent early day motion to Parliament. Through Dee's hard work, this matter is seen by all and will have, and I hope, a positive effect nationwide. So just like to say thank you very much to Dee for your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Cheers. Item 11, there are no questions from members to the chairman this evening. Item 12 is the committee work programme. It is there on page 5, as you can see, because it only goes up till June at the moment in time until there's agenda setting meetings, etc. And I have Councillor Atkinson and Councillor Harper. They want to speak on this at the moment. So if we go Councillor Atkinson first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I was looking at the committee work programme and was disappointed to note that the report on the anti-idling policy is second last on the work programme, with the date still TBC. This motion was originally put to full council at its meeting on the 30th of September last. It was then debated at SPI on the 18th of November. The SPI committee minutes notes that the recommendation to move forward with an anti-idling policy is accepted in principle. Officers were asked to bring a full report to a future meeting. Now, bearing in mind that a very full briefing note was produced for both meetings, which I've just mentioned, I wouldn't have thought that much more officer time was needed to produce a report stating how this policy could be implemented. We all know how damaging air pollution is. For example, it is linked to nearly 6 in every 100 deaths of over 30s in Kent. As I'm sure you know, Canterbury City Council has recently installed a series of signs across the district, reminding drivers to switch off their engines when waiting at level crossings. This was done following a joint research project with the University of Kent. The study found that carefully worded signs can cut the number of drivers leaving their engines running or idling by 38%. And led to a reduction in air pollution in those parts of the city. One of the signs says 1 minute of engine idling will fill 150 balloons with air pollution. That's quite a sobering message, isn't it? The idea behind this is not to penalise drivers, it's to improve air quality in accordance with Maidstone Council's low emissions strategy introduced in December 2017. Having said that, although I prefer persuasion, I'll carry on. Having said that, although I prefer persuasion to prosecution, I do feel that this needs to be backed up by adopting the appropriate regulations which have been available since 2002. So may I ask that the full report be brought to the June meeting of this committee? Thank you, Chair.
Derek, you're on mute.
Thank you. I didn't realise. I don't know what happened there. Okay, thank you. What I was going to say is that Councillor, John Littlemore's on the call this evening, so perhaps I can bring John in after Paul Harper.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Really just to reiterate what Keith said, this is important. We've, if you like, since we put this up to full council, we've already missed the first return of schools in March. We're now going to miss them when they coming back in April. One of the major areas where we could reduce idling is at schools, at drop-off times and pick-up times. I mean, I live opposite 3 secondary schools and Mid-Kent College, and I just witness every morning hundreds and hundreds of cars with their engines idling. You know, how much pollution is that creating, and you know, what's the impact of that, not only on residents in the area, but in particular on the pupils themselves. You know, we all know the impact of inhaling particulates is not good for people's long-term health. It seems a shame that this is taking so long. And I do sincerely hope that we will bring a report in June, because my big concern on this is with Keith retiring from the council in the next month, that this will just be put typically into the difficult to deal with long grass bucket, which seems to be quite a common feature at Maidstone Council, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Before I just bring in John Littlemore, I took a photograph recently, and I'm not sure actually where I took it, but it was it reads of a sign in the road, but it's "Please don't idle, switch off your engine," and the logos on the bottom of it are the Care for Air Kent and Medway, which is the joint partnership, Clean Air for Schools campaign, Maidstone Borough Council and Swale Borough Council. So I think something is being moved on by the environmental team, but I'll go over to Mr. Littlemore. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Just primarily to give reassurance to members that the issue is taken very seriously, and we have initiated meetings already to look at the topic. What that revealed was that our parking enforcement officers currently do have powers available to them and exercise those powers to encourage people to switch off. So taking that into account that it's already happening, and the fact that we do have limited officer capacity at the moment, and the priority for those officers is to follow the map to get us back out of where we've been with COVID. So very much that is the primary priority for those staff. That was the reason why the report is being put back to the summer. But that, as I say, that doesn't stop us doing what we are capable of doing now, which is already taking place. Just in terms of enforcement, I do agree with members that the way forward really is about encouraging people to behave more responsibly. And we certainly don't have adequate numbers of officers to be able to patrol the schools at drop-off and pick-up time. But that is where the environmental health team do work very hard with those schools and PTAs to make sure that that message gets across. So we'll certainly take that on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. I've got Councillor Margaret Rose next, please.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to speak quite so quickly. Chair, I'm delighted with your response to Mrs. Bonet's question. Can I please follow up a question to Mr. Littlemore on something that Dee was unable to ask as her supplementary question? And the question I have is, can I ask if residents at this time are aware of the provisions and the possibility of being allowed under the requirements that we have at the moment to keep their companion animals and will not be penalised in the effect?
Margaret, could I just butt in a minute? We're on the community work, the committee work programme at the moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it's completely up to Mr. Littlemore if he wants to come in now.
So,
but
what this was involved with was refreshing the council tenancy strategy, which will be taken on the 1st of June. So this is a question I wanted to ask about the work programme, which will go forward on the 1st of June. Sorry, I didn't make that completely clear.
Okay,
so, yeah, so that question, as we know that if they're not aware, if residents are not aware, they could be penalised by making themselves intentionally homeless. So we will be discussing, we will have the chance on the 1st of June to discuss this policy. But I'm just wondering at this moment if they are aware that this policy is a pilot scheme going forward. If Mr. Littlemore wishes to answer now, okay. If not, I can ask again on the 1st of June. So therefore, okay. Sorry, I didn't make that completely clear. Also, just to say that, as I have said when I thanked Dee, this is a really important policy, which also to thank members of Parliament who have put the early day motion in Parliament recently. And just to say, as I think we are all aware, that this is very much a policy to be able to lead nationally in showing the kind of compassion that Maidstone Borough has for the needs of its residents. So I think that's, as you know, I'm passionate about this policy. So thank you very much for the opportunity of saying something.
That's all right, Margaret. Thank you very much. We're leading the way on this council at the moment.
We are indeed, yes. Yeah, thank you.
To you, John.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I was actually in the office last week and overheard one of our team talking to somebody who had approached us for assistance, and I was really pleased the way that they were engaging with that person. And one of the things that they were going through was exactly that: what pets are in the family, how can we help with that? So yes, I can reassure members that all of our team is making sure that applicants are aware of the new policy and it's been successfully implemented. Thank you.
I'm delighted. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, John. Any other questions regarding the committee work programme, folks?
Derek,
Councillor Powell, I've got you down.
It's not a direct question. It's really just to back up what Councillor Atkinson was saying just now with regard to the air quality. I mean, for those of you that can remember the times of the planning committee back in 2015, this was almost one of my pet subjects, so much so that I said something to our environmental officer at the time, which the chairman threatened to ask me to leave the meeting because of it, which I was full of regret afterwards, I must say. But I did feel quite passionate at the time. And just to explain to members that the problem with the area of Maidstone is it's between the South Downs and the North Downs, and it falls into a dip. So I was talking back in those days with regarding to the building on the Sutton Road. That's before it all exploded, yeah. And I was concerned about traffic movements into Maidstone, and also the school, which is in my ward, which is on the right-hand side as you move into it. And we found that the particles in the air were considerably higher than what they should be. It was almost touching the sorts of figures that you would expect to see in London. So, you know, my concern at the time was, could we have more monitoring equipment in different places? Because the monitoring equipment that was available at that particular time in Parkwood wasn't working, and nobody could tell us the last time that it did work. So I think just following on from that, if we could talk as part of the work programme about getting more equipment around the borough at these peak spots, not just up a Stone Street, but various other places, like the Wheatsheaf was another place that was cited. And I'm sure there's other places whereby we can actually measure those levels and act accordingly, because if we can actually present the council and also present to the public how bad idling actually is and what effect then it might make a big difference if they're aware of the reason behind it, rather than just us miserable old councillors asking them to stop their cars running every time they get stuck in a traffic jam. So thank you ever so much, Councillor Atkinson, for bringing that up. I think it's a very, very valid point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. Thank you. I've got Councillor Joy next, and then Councillor Kimmons. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance before, if I'm back on the 1st of June, regarding Heather House, that it will be, is it to be a written update? And if so, or if it's an oral update from William and Andrew Connors, fine. But I would like a little bit of reassurance that it isn't going to be an update from ward members, because I did think that wasn't handled so well at the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there an officer that'd like to comment on that at all, please? Do we have William online?
Hello, sorry, Chair. Mr. Cornell's not online this evening, but I can certainly feed back Councillor Joy's concern. I believe that it will be a report with an officer presentation.
Brilliant,
Thank you.
Brilliant. If not, Chairman, can I ask that maybe you and Eddie pick it up at the Chairman's agenda setting and briefing or whatever? Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. It's on the top of the list,
Thank
Denise.
you.
Anyway, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Kimmons next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow on from what Councillor Powell said, I mean, it's not all bad news, because most modern cars now have really, really good DPF filters. So the smaller particulates get caught up and then they get burnt off in one big. That's why sometimes you see a puff of smoke coming out of the back of a bus or a taxi. It's because they're burning off the small particulates, and it comes out as a big particulate. And the other thing is that we have start-stop technology in most new vehicles anyway, so they don't idle when they're sat outside of a school, because the engine just cuts off, unless obviously it's cold or the battery's running low. They do automatically cut off. So yeah, it's not all bad news, but I know we've got a long way to go, but there is positives to come out of it as well.
Yeah. I think the current, I mean, this is off the top of my head, Ash, is that the current legislation says you can idle your engine if it's essential. It's one of those words which is a very grey area. So that's what the law of the land says. In Germany, you cannot. You're not allowed to idle a car, even when you go out in the morning and start up on a frosty morning. You're supposed to drive away and not leave it idling. So that's something to think about. I've got Val Springett. Did you want to speak, Val?
No, I just wanted to say, can we just put this item on the work programme, please, and not discuss it now? We've got quite a big agenda. We seem to be going a little bit off-piste, so that was all. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Noted. Thank you. There's one other item I'd just like to mention on the work programme, and there's a part of the committee's function. It acts as the overview and scrutiny committee for crime and disorder, and the next meeting's been scheduled for the 1st of June at 6:30. And the ordinary meeting of this committee will start on at 7:30 on that day. So that's just for noting. So that's the work programme for noting. Lovely. Thank you very much. Item 13. There are no reports from outside bodies. So we move on to item 14, the safeguarding policy refresh, and we go over to Hannah Gaston. Hannah.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, councillors. I hope you're well. This item is very quick. I just wanted to update you and also ask for decision on the 2 points at the end. But I'll just give you a really quick overview. The safeguarding policy was written about 5 years ago. It was very long. It was about 50 pages. And through feedback from yourselves and colleagues who were trying to navigate it, it was too long. So basically, we have streamlined that down to 20 pages. So it's easier for people to navigate and understand, and also get an overview of our responsibilities as a district council. And the statutory safeguarding responsibility does sit with Kent County Council. So we have refreshed the policy. Alongside that, we have also recruited new safeguarding champions. We've operated safeguarding training, and we've refreshed our safeguarding SharePoint site, which collects all the data for the organisation. And so far, since that went live at the end of October last year, we've had 30 safeguarding alerts raised, mainly to do with domestic abuse and mental health problems. So I'm asking for you to agree to this refreshed policy, and also in 12 months so we can come back and review the safeguarding alerts that have been raised in the past year or year and a half then, to see at the trends, and also it helps us to see what's going on in our communities across the district. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Hannah, and thank you for all the work you do on this. And I've been to a number of the meetings just to let everyone know, and I've heard lots of people speak from KCC right across the board, the whole team involved with this, and there's some very dedicated people regarding domestic violence and safeguarding and the processes involved, and there's an excellent job going on there. And so I have got, first of all, Daniel Rose. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Hannah. That sounds really good. I have anecdotal evidence of this from my wife, who's a teacher, and I know how difficult these processes can be to navigate at times. So yeah, good to hear that it's being streamlined. I've got two questions really. What has there been any substantive changes in terms of the policy? Obviously, you've streamlined things down, but has there been anything dramatically that's changed? And two, obviously that sounds good coming back in a year and a half to review it. When we're reviewing it, what for you will be the what will a success look like for you? What are the objectives you want to get out of this? So what are you going to mark the success of this against, as it were?
Okay, thank you. Shall I answer those now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Hannah. Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so there haven't really been any substantive changes to the policy. It's literally been taken information that is useful information, but it's overloaded information for us. As we aren't the statutory power for safeguarding, that lies with Kent, we don't need to have that level of detail. So the policy in essence is still the same. We still have the same processes of alerting, of champions, of concern. I'm the designated safeguarding officer, so people can come to me if they have concerns, and John as well, Mr. Littlemore on the call. He also does that alongside myself. So the changes aren't, it's just easier for us to navigate and read for our level of approach. In terms of reviewing it, I think really, if we get a safeguarding alert raised, then that is a success, because it means that a staff member or a colleague, an officer, has thought that something is not right. And even if it comes to nothing, it's still good they've raised it, because it means that safeguarding is in everyone's mind, which is the biggest challenge as an organisation, because we touch so many services in the community. We need to ensure that our staff are fully aware and briefed of what safeguarding means. So, and also I suppose it will help us look for the trends. As I said, most of the issues that we have involve mental health concerns and domestic abuse, and then this will, I guess, think how we tailor our services, or if there's anything more that we could be doing. Do we have to raise this with the One-Stop Shop or the Domestic Abuse Forum, which my colleague Martin James manages? You know, it helps us evidence what the work that we need to do for the future to ensure that we're keeping our population as safe as possible. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Okay, Councillor Joy.
Yeah, two good questions, Daniel. They were a couple that very similar, and good responses from Hannah. And just to say, I too found the report, it was a good report, interesting. I thought it was good to have the contact info at the back, which I saw was relevant and wasn't just pages and pages of different contacts that, you know, that may never be needed. So, yeah, I thought it was a very good report, and I would be happy to agree the recommendations, Chairman, on page 6.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to any questions? No. No. Okay. When I had the chairman's briefing the other week, I said that the best part of the report, if I can put it like that, it doesn't sound the correct one, was the flow chart in it.
Yeah.
So that's what I picked up. Okay, lovely. So we have two recommendations, folks. One that the refreshed safeguarding policy has adopted, and number two, to review safeguarding data collected across the organisation in 12 months. It was proposed by Councillor Joy, and in the RIM, I've got, is that Margaret Rose you're seconding?
Yes, if that's what you'd like me to do. Yes, definitely agreeing with Councillor Joy.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Right. Well, we don't need to vote on this. If there's silence, I'll take that it's agreed across the board.
Agreed.
I said silence. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you. Okay, lovely. We go over to item 15 now, please. The Private Sector Housing Enforcement Policy 2021. And that's over to Nigel Bucklow. Over to you, Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members. My name's Nigel Bucklow. I'm the Housing and Health Manager in the Housing and Community Service. Part of the work of the Housing and Health team is to maintain and improve housing conditions in all property tenures by ensuring compliance with the legislative framework. The policy that's before you applies to all those who are responsible for property across all tenures. The current policy is out of date insofar that there have been a range of powers that have been introduced by legislation and regulatory changes over the last few years. So the updated enforcement policy that you have before you is really embracing those changes. So the main changes that have been introduced since 2016 were for the minimum energy efficiency standards that came into operation effectively in 2018. And we have got the Tenant Fees Act that also came in 2019. And that was dealing with the ability of landlords or their agents from charging certain fees. Banning orders have been introduced against rogue landlords. Electrical safety standards is another one that's fresh on the books. That's applies to all tenancies from April 21. And we've also introduced the financial penalties as an alternative to prosecution. And that came in 2016 under the Housing and Planning Act. So it gave the authorities, local authorities, the power to create that penalty structure, which is set out in the agenda item. So the option that we have is really to for approval, seeking approval for the new policy. We have called it the housing private sector housing enforcement policy. In actual fact, it may be more appropriate to call it the housing standards policy because it does cover all tenures, not just limited to those in the private sector. So if members could indicate for that to happen, that would be handy. So yeah, any questions?
Okay, no, thank you very much, Nigel. I haven't got anybody indicating in there though, but are members happy if we do change it to the updated, what did you say, Nigel? Was it standards?
Housing standards policy. Housing standards policy.
Mr. Chairman, I think I did indicate, but I don't think anything's come up on the.
No.
I actually, before me, I think Councillor Daniel Rose also indicated. I'm not sure whether he wanted to go before me.
Right, hang on. Right, I beg your pardon.
That was actually for the previous agenda item.
Oh, that was for the previous, was it? Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
no,
I think so.
Yeah, it's just a bit of clarification, really, because obviously, certainly social housing is one of the things that comes up time and time again, and where the majority of our social housing goes to Golding Homes. So does this policy actually include outside bodies? Because most of the social housing within the borough, much to my annoyance at times, is not even with us. It's with those people. So how exactly would this policy work with all the outside bodies that we have to work with?
Yes, the policy applies to social housing landlords as much as it does to perhaps what may be described as private landlords, those with perhaps 1 or 2 houses under their belt. So yeah, the Housing Act, which is the main body of legislation that we tend to use, does apply to social housing landlords. Oh, we're losing.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you. I believe I have Val Springett next. Val.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment, please. There was a lot of recent publicity about, it might be in Croydon Council or somewhere, that has some appalling conditions. I mean, unbelievably appalling conditions in some of their properties. I just wondered if you could reassure me that we haven't got any of those in Maidstone, please, because I was quite shocked with what I saw, and I think the councillors in that borough should be quite ashamed of themselves. So I just wonder if you could reassure me that we haven't got anything anywhere near the state of those properties that got the recent publicity on the news.
I'm not aware of any properties in the borough that have got conditions that mirror those in the London Borough of Croydon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And if you're going to get updated on the Croydon issue, if you bought the last probably 2 years of Private Eye magazine, it was chronicled in there regarding Croydon Council. Not that I'm advertising at all. And I've got Margaret Rose next.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bucklow, I see an item mentioning penalties imposed. Can I ask possibly how many, or if there have been penalties imposed?
No. So this policy is brought in for your approval. The element that sees financial penalties being brought in to some of the that apply to some of the Housing Act. So improvement notices that, for instance, where you may have a landlord who hasn't done certain things that they're required to do, and we're required to serve an improvement notice, and that could be extended to, well, the improvement notice has been served, but the landlord still doesn't do it. Then we need to look at what the options are available to us. Now, the a financial penalty element to that does enable us to apply a financial penalty to those landlords who are not compliant. Obviously, it's a way down the road in the sense that we will do everything that we possibly can to encourage landlords to do what is necessary at their properties, but ultimately the financial penalties aspect of the Enforcement Policy Acts could act as a deterrent to landlords as well.
So has this been put in place by Maidstone Borough?
Sorry, that's what we're seeking. That's what we're seeking approval for, to include it within the enforcement policy.
Good.
So,
right, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. Dan Rose next, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Nigel. This is a really good report. I was interested in obviously you've outlined some really good punitive measures that seem really sensible. I'm looking at page 67 on the inspection of the premises. I may have missed it, so if I have, I apologise. But what other mechanisms are there for starting this process? Is this something that the tenant has to have contacted the relevant team at MBC to start this rolling along? Obviously, you speak about inspections, but how does that? Do you carry out random inspections, or is it only on a kind of tip-off basis? Like, how does it sort of come about that this process is started with a particular property?
Okay, so are we talking specifically under houses in multiple occupation, or are we talking wider?
I mean, yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's what it's talking about on page 67. But yeah, just wider if you can, just to get an understanding of how that all works.
So obviously, from the perspective of an enforcement policy, we generally will get complaints in from residents. Could be tenants, it could be neighbours who are dissatisfied with, if they're a tenant, you know, the disrepair of the property. If it's a neighbour, it could be there's a lot of people going in and out of a house at all times of the day and night, and that would give us cause to inspect or visit the property to establish what's going on. If it's a tenant complaint, what we would expect the tenant to have done in the first instance is to have reported it to their landlord, because the landlord, being the person responsible for the fixtures and fittings and in the property, should have the opportunity to address those. So if a tenant is saying, "Oh, I can't get any hot water," but hasn't actually bothered to report it to the landlord, well, we will say to them, well, first you need to report that back to the landlord, and then whilst the landlord approaches a heating engineer to come out and fix the problem. And obviously after a reasonable period of time, could be a couple of weeks, if they haven't sorted that out, then we would have justifiable reasons for visiting the property to look into that complaint further. But we can do it in a range of ways. What they call proactive inspections can be undertaken. We do inspections in HMOs as well. So there's a mixture of both things, really. There's reactive and proactive.
Is a couple of weeks all right if a boiler's broken? And is that like is that a time frame that's set by us, or is it?
Yeah, no. I think when you reflect on timescales, if you imagine that in your own property, for instance, and you may have a gas boiler, and you wake up one morning and there's no hot water, and then you think, okay, well, we need to call somebody out. That could be, within 48 hours to come and fix the problem, to come and look at the problem. And when he arrives, the engineer arrives on site and he says, yeah, that's great, but there's a part here that I need to replace in your boiler to make it work properly. Oh, and by the way, there's a two-week lead-in time, because we can't get the spares at the moment, because I don't know, they're coming from far away, and the supply is just not available at the current time. So we wouldn't, in all fairness, want to be able to punish, if the word punish is the correct one, anybody who's trying their level best to put the problem right, because none of us could do anything better, if you like. So I think that's what we have to consider.
Okay, no, fair enough. Sorry, that wasn't actually the question I wanted to ask. I just wanted to. I had a similar thing happen to me actually a couple of last week. My boiler broke, and I'm fortunate that I have the means to call a wide variety of companies, and whoever says they can come today, they came that day, and it was fixed the following day. But obviously, I have the means to do that, but I would imagine that a lot of landlords also have a similar means to make things happen, because if it needs to happen, it needs to happen.
Yes.
But yeah, I appreciate that's not the remit of this. how long is acceptable for someone to wait for their boiler to be fixed? But yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I won't carry on, but that's that was just my thoughts on that one. But thank you for your clarification.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. I've got Councillor Joy next, please.
It's probably a very quick question. On the levels of fines, could you tell me where those amounts have come from? Where you know, why £2,500 that goes up to 3,000? Who decides that?
So the amounts that are quoted within the table there, the maximum amount is £30,000, which you've probably seen. The figures drawing down to the bottom of the table reflect the different levels of culpability, whether or not we've got repeat offenders, and how many properties they own, for instance. So, you know, obviously, if you are have a large portfolio of properties, then clearly, if you're not doing something that you're supposed to be doing, you're going to have greater benefit from not doing it than you would if you're a single owner, as it were, of
That's
one
clear.
property.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Val, you want to come back again, please?
Sorry, yes, very quickly. I had an issue, I think about a year, 18 months ago, with a resident in a terrace property whose adjoining property was a private rental property with quite a bad damp problem, rotten window frames. She was very concerned it was affecting her property. When I sought advice, I was told that the tenant in the rental property had to do the complaining. They were due to move out in a few months, and then so they weren't going to raise the issue. A new tenant was due to move in, so they were unlikely to raise the issue. So she was rather stuck, knowing that the property next door was in a poor condition, but she had no avenue to follow. I just wondered if that's still the case.
So, in the sense that if the tenant hadn't reported it, but the neighbour had reported the fact that the window frames were looking perhaps slightly down at heel. So what we're tending to deal with is major repairs that are going to be significant, that impact on the health of the individuals living in that property. If the landlord has chosen not to decorate his windows and his doors and his door frames, it makes the house look unkempt, but it doesn't necessarily trigger an action under the Housing Act.
Okay, no, I think it wasn't that, it was a damp issue, but because the tenants weren't reporting it, she was rather stuck.
Sorry to cut across, you can say in most of those situations, what would arise is a civil action that if that property was being left in such disrepair that it was impacting negatively on her own property, she'd have a cause for action in her own right. So she would have to look at a civil remedy herself rather than approaching us. We can only really act in those situations where the tenant themselves are complaining about the situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've got just a brief question for you, Nigel. Regarding complaints on, say, registered providers or whatever, if we have an issue and if something's outstanding, should we come to you immediately? Should we factor in you every time we get a complaint? Do you know what I'm saying? At what stage do you think you like to know, if you know what I'm saying?
Right. So if you are receiving complaints from the public in your ward areas to say that my landlord, hasn't repaired the boiler for weeks on end, or we're concerned about something, as I explained earlier on, our opening kind of gambit here is to say, well, have you reported it to the landlord?
Yes.
Now, if they have reported it to the landlord and many weeks ago and they still not heard anything, then of course, draw it to our attention. We can pick that up accordingly. So if you're contacting us on behalf of a member of the public who's, a tenant who's got issues, then yeah, please forward that on to us.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I thought that might be the case, but I'm just trying to think of a pincer movement to get things done, if you know what I mean. So yeah, which is quite often it's a time frame. Quite often there's a response from some registered providers, but some are longer than others. If I can put, even if it's the boiler issue or the same boiler in different registered providers, if I can put it like that, we've got some that act quicker than others. If I can, so yeah.
Understood. Yeah, that's fine. But if you've got somebody who's been, months, not having something repaired, which should reasonably not take more than a few weeks to repair, then by all means let us know.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right, I don't have anybody else that wishes to speak at the moment. So I'm going to read out the recommendation because we're going to change the wording from private sector to housing standards enforcement policy. So if I read it from the top on page 34, the committee approved the updated housing standards enforcement policy 21 to 25 attached in Appendix A, including the table of financial penalties to be applied under sections 23, 126 and Schedule 9 of the Housing and Planning Act 2016 as drafted. That's been proposed by Councillor Kimmons in the IM, and I will second that with you, Ash. If I hear silence, I will assume that's unanimous. That's agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Okay, we go on to item 16. Access to services review update, and over to Orla to present this, starting on page 94.
Good evening all. As many of you remember, this committee agreed to review access to services, evaluating the council's digital accessibility, communications and buildings. Councillors Burton, Mrs Joy, Mortimer Powell and Mrs Rose put themselves forward for the review panel. The report on your agenda this evening provides a brief overview and update on their undertakings so far. The panel began the review with digital accessibility and have evaluated the Council's website to understand how it now meets the government and EU accessibility guidance and legislation for public sector websites. They met with the digital team and were pleased to learn that the website was compliant ahead of the deadline and were informed on how this had been achieved and what an accessible website meant in terms of the council services and content. There were a further 2 sessions on digital services. The second meeting was to evaluate the service offer with 100 services now available online, and the third meeting considered the importance of digital inclusion and the impact of digital exclusion, looking at Maidstone and comparing it with the national picture. The panel have recently moved on to communication, starting with community engagement. Involve was invited to a session in March and explained the work it did and how it supports Maidstone Borough Council in engaging with the wider community through its forums and community repository. The panel are currently developing the community repository with the policy and information team to ensure it is fully representative of Maidstone and to identify any gaps. The panel have a calendar of meetings ahead, detailed at Appendix 1 and at Appendix 2 the actions or recommendations emerging from its evidence gathering and initial findings so far. It's too early to draw any conclusions, therefore a final report with recommendations will be produced at the end of the review and brought back to this committee. And I know that some members of the panel would like to add to this, so can I invite their comments, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Orla. Thank you. Okay, I've got for those who haven't been on the panel and that, and I must say it's certainly opened up a few things that we thought that the council had to do, and I didn't realise that they were doing them. If I can put it like that, the actual standards we have to keep to and things. So it's extremely informative. It's been a pleasure to be on it. First of all, I've got Councillor Margaret Rose, and then I've got Denise Joy. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. I very much agree with what you have just said, and I would just like to thank the officers for the hard work that they've put in to this whole matter, and just to say that, as you say, Chair, we have learned quite a lot about this. I'd also like to thank the officers for the reception they have given to the comments and suggestions that we have made, and just to say that I am looking forward to seeing the way forward, which is described on pages 104 to 106, which is, as I say, a communal effort between the subcommittee members and the officers. So thank you very much for the report, and also for the hard work put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, over to you, Denise.
Sorry. Yes, I've got to agree with what's been said. I personally have done a few subcommittees from committees, and this has definitely been one of the more rewarding ones. We seem to have really picked up a pace now, and true, it's good to be part, completely to feel part of what's been going on and learning things as we've been going on. But I think the biggest thing for me has been that we want to make sure that it's shared, and I think it's going to be quite surprising when the councillors get more information and know what's going on. And I think, is it Appendix 2? If you look at the, which I'm sure you have, look at the recommendations and the actions that are being looked at the moment, that's going to tell you how important this document is going to be. And I'm really grateful to have been part of it. I've learnt a lot. And well done, Orla. You deserve our thanks. And for all the people that have spoken to us. So, yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Okay. Eddie Powell next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm just following on from the previous speakers. I think it's been an amazing effort. And one of the things that I was really taken back by is certainly on the IT policy, the fact that there was only 2 officers that was actually doing an amazing amount of work. And something was mentioned at some time, Mr. Chairman, that this council's website was now rated as one of the best council websites in the whole of the country. I mean, I don't know whether that can be verified. I'm sure that the officer who's brought this report to the table would certainly know that in a second if that was the case. But
I think
if so,
it was achieving a very, very high standard in terms of its accessibility in relation to the legislation and guidance that it needed to fulfil. So, and that's measured, I think, on a weekly basis, and perhaps one of the things that the panel would like to make more explicit to the rest of the council, and find a way to do that.
No, I'm all for sort of backslapping, you know, when it's warranted, and I think this is certainly a case. So it's just another well done, Mr. Chairman, to the officers involved with us. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you. Any questions from anybody else? No. So you've got away with that, Orla. That's very no, that's very good. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your time and Lauren's time you've put in on this. And I know we've got there's going to be a lot more to do going forward, and it's like turning a mirror back on the council and looking at itself and picking up the possibly any chinks, if I can put it like that, and we can kick those up. And we were already doing that going forward, so it's great. It's been very pleasurable to sit on.
There's lots of work ahead, and I think certainly Councillor Joy has been bringing new threads to the review, which I think will enhance some of the outcomes for us, but she can share those with the panel at a more fitting time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, we've got, this is just for noting this evening, folks, for your information. So I guess that's all approved. This is no dissent. Lovely. So we'll now go on to item 17, declaration of local nature reserves. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman, and Thank you, members of the committee. So item 17 before you this evening is for noting on the work programme to progress the decision that was made back in December 2019 to bring forward the priority sites for nature conservation, important sites for local nature reserve declaration. In the intervening time, the report has not sat idle, but we were waiting for resources and an instruction of where that work programme would sit. And before you this evening is the proposal to bring forward 5/6 sites in this first tranche, with the table presented on page 110 of those sites that are deemed to be the best to bring forward with the resources at disposal. And so we have the Fant Wildlife Area, Allington Millennium Green, the Weavering Heath, and with that 5 acre on Wentz Wood and Hale Park and Spot Lane Nature Area. The progress to bring these forward will take the best part of a year, but I do strongly believe some of these sites can be brought forward much more quickly. So Fant Wildlife Area and perhaps 1 or 2 others will be in that very first grouping, which will also test the policy and procedures and the response we have from Natural England and the legal processes. If there are any specific queries and questions, then I'm happy to take questions and answer as best as I can.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. Okay, we'll start off with Paul Harper first. Paul, please.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Andrew, for the report. It seems to be the end of a really long saga, or almost the end of a long saga. I think Keith has spoken to you before. I can remember the report which came on the 30th of October 2018, which came to the Len Heritage Culture and Leisure Committee when we looked into this initially. And, you know, 3 years later, we almost seem to be there. I think, as Andrew said, some of these proposals might be up to another year before they're implemented. But this is why Keith and I earlier raised our concerns partly on anti-idling. It's just a time certain things take to get through the council. We've had actually 4 budget cycles, 2018-19, 19-20, 2021, and now 21-22 to sort this out if resourcing was a problem. But you know, we are where we are, and hopefully you know, Keith, as I say, is standing down from the council in a couple of months. I'm sure everybody here tonight congratulates Keith for the work he's done for the council over the last 5 years, and also for his tenacity in ensuring that this report hasn't fallen off the agenda, because I know Keith I've been in correspondence with Keith when he's been talking with Derek and Margaret and other councillors to ensure that we've kept this or kept on getting it back on track. Obviously, as a Fant councillor and a member and a trustee for Fant Wildlife, I'm very pleased to hear that our first local nature reserve to be declared is most likely to be in Fant, which you know, I very much look forward to. One of the opportunities this does give us, and it will give all of those sites shown on the various appendices and maps, is the opportunity to bring in a lot of external funding to Maidstone as a community. At Fant Wildlife, we for one know that once we have nature reserve status, that's going to unlock a lot of opportunities for us to get funding, and I'm sure it will be the same for the others. So all I can urge you really, Andrew, probably, is working with your colleagues to get this done as quick as possible, because we do know that, you know, Spot Lane, Howell Park, Weavering Heath, 5 acres, Allington Millennium Green, as well as the Fant Wildlife Area, will all really benefit from the status, because the groups running them then can go out and bid for money. And because you've got local nature reserve status, it's going to be a lot easier to open doors which we can't get into now. So I'd like to thank Keith really for his tenacity in pushing this through, and hope that the committee note it tonight, and that we still continue to push this as quickly as we can do, because you know, I'm really looking forward to the first site getting the declaration, hopefully in the next month or two, and Keith will be there with a proverbial green key or whatever to unlock Fant Wildlife once we've been declared a local nature reserve. And on that score, I'll hand over to Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yes, I'll be there with something, a bottle of something, I suspect. Yeah, and thanks for those kind words. Yes, I think I said at the previous meeting, Fant is oven ready. I don't know where I got that phrase from, really, to be converted into a local nature reserve. I've only got one question, really. Currently, we call ourselves Fant Wildlife. I don't know really the procedure, but when the designation is made, we'd like the name changed to Fant Local Nature Reserve. So I'm not really sure if that's down to the wildlife group itself or down to the committee. So that's my only question. So thank you.
Over to you, Andrew.
We can name of that makes sense locally. It's our choosing. So the naming, if it wants to be brought to committee for decision, or whether you're happy to go with Fant Local Nature Reserve, I think that is something that is so easily done. We can settle on names as we progress through the process.
Well, that's good, because that's what our committee, the Fant Wildlife Group Committee, I should say, wants. So yeah, we'd be very grateful to be called Fant Local Nature Reserve in the future. So thanks for that.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. I've got Margaret Rose next, please, Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as a councillor for Fant and aware of the group, I know how hardworking they are, and as is said, this has taken a long time to seem to have gone a short way. But thank you very much, Mr. Williams, for your opening comments about Fant. And as I say, I'm sure there's other councillors who feel strongly about their own particular wards. And just to also endorse that it is my understanding that Fant Wildlife and now Fant LNR have been ready to proceed for quite a considerable amount of time. So I'm sure this will please the committee. And just another footnote, really, the actual area of the what we now call the LNR is actually placed in quite a difficult area of Fant with substandard housing. So it can be hoped that the people that live actually in that immediate area will benefit from that, along with other residents in Fant. So thank you very much, and look forward to the way forward. Thank you very much.
Super, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I mean, for me, this is a bit like buses, because quite a few members in our group have declared we'll have one nature reserve a year. And that was going back to when I became a councillor, and now we've got 6 that come along together. So if you get, it's one of those scenarios where we sort of work on one and work on another one and things, and then we get this. I'd like to thank everybody for their input on this, and I think it's a wonderful thing for the borough to have these registered nature reserves, which will be nationally noted, if I could put it like that, and go on the list. A lot of it, from Hale Park's point of view, if I could speak on behalf of the people there, a lot of it is volunteer work that gets these places straight and in the right order. And I think also not only the volunteers, but having a robust management plan. If I must admit, we've had we've had issues regarding coppicing numerous times at Hale Park over the recent years. Why are you cutting all the trees down? You've probably had the same at Fant and things like that. And we've had to explain coppicing. And we found at the end of the day, through our own volunteers, they've been learning as well. And we've been educating the local local residents and beyond now. Because of COVID, we've got more people using these open spaces. So it's a fantastic thing to have. It's a pity we didn't have them before COVID, but I won't go there. But a lot of them are now going to actually have that main status. And I'm really pleased that we've actually got there in the end. And thank you, Andrew, for bringing this report forward for us. And I'm sure coming down the line there will be a few more come in the years to come. So that'd be good. Thank you.
Super.
Thank you, Andrew. I was going to say is that the report is just for noting. So is everybody okay with that?
Happy with it. Thank you.
Agreed.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Lovely. Super. Now then, that is the end of the item before we go into part 2. And I'd just like to say, before we're still in the public area, I'd just like to say thank you to all the members on the committee. And some of them are not here this evening, but thank you for everyone's input. We've done a lot on this committee. Over a screen in our back bedrooms, in our back sheds, etc., for the last 14 months, and it's been quite interesting. But some of the subjects we've got the pet policy, which was spoken about tonight. We've done that. There's numerous housing policies, the homelessness, the success with homelessness we've had there. So it's been great, and I mean the waste and the waste collections during COVID and all the other problems we've had. So just thank you for everybody coming along and your time and all the effort that you've put in, and thank you to all the officers as well for putting up with us. So thank you. So we'll be closing